Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran, and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. And I have with me a very special guest, Ambassador Ugo Astuto of the European Union to India, to talk about the EU-India ties in relation to the COVID-19 situation obtaining in Europe and South Asia as we speak, and other matters of regional and global interest. Ambassador Astuto, thank you for making time to be on DD India. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, Ambassador, let me get down straight to the obvious question, and that has to do with the COVID-19 situation obtaining in Europe and many parts of the world. What's your sense of the situation obtaining in Europe, and how and why is it that some say Europe is the worst hit?
Well, look, this is a pandemic.
Right.
So the whole world is affected. And it's affected at the beginning of the crisis. No one around the world was really prepared for something of this magnitude. Mm-hmm. So it has taken some time for the international community to realize the dimension of the challenge. When it comes to the European Union, well, in the past few weeks, we have taken extraordinary measures to deal with the situation. Just a few examples. We have created a common stockpile of medical equipment. We have invested in research for treatments and vaccines. We have organized joint procurement for the most urgent supplies, such as protective equipment.
Right.
And we have set up a team of experts from across Europe to share the best knowledge to save lives. So in short, we now in Europe, we are using every available tool to save lives in a truly European spirit of solidarity. And I'm convinced that Europe will emerge from this crisis even stronger. And hopefully what we see now is that the countries that have been hit first, what we see is a progressive decrease in the number of cases. So this does not mean that we can lower the guard, obviously, but we can be hopeful that we are beyond the peak of the crisis.
Indeed. If I can rewind to late January and early February, Ambassador, when China was still grappling and struggling with containing the virus in the Hubei province, in Wuhan in particular. And then suddenly we saw it spread to Italy, Spain, France, now Belgium, the Netherlands, and many countries, including across the Atlantic, the US, for instance. Is there any understanding in the European Union today as we speak, in Brussels in particular, about the origin and spread of the coronavirus from Wuhan to all corners of the world?
Well, look, I think we would all welcome a thorough scientific inquiry into the origins of the virus. That's important for the future to prevent further global crisis. But the priority now is saving lives.
Right.
The priority is to address the health challenge, and it's important we all pull together at bilateral and multilateral level. Today, that's the focus. We need to overcome the health emergency, and we need to do it all together. The international community must come together, and we need to together to address the situation using all the multilateral tools we have in a spirit of global solidarity.
In that context, Ambassador, does the European Union have a EU-wide plan for itself and also measures or collaborations with other organizations around the world?
Well, we certainly do. When it comes to the domestic challenge, I've indicated a few of the measures taken. It's a fact that the European Union now is addressing the situation as one, with a maximum coordination and a spirit of solidarity. But the same applies when it comes to multilateral fora. It's a global crisis.
Right.
Which means that we need a global response, and global solutions are required. That's why obviously the UN and the World Health Organization have a significant role to play in this respect. So we have to increase global resilience, and the European Union is playing its part. We have mobilized 400 million euro to boost global preparedness. This will be this amount will be used to support the World Health Organization.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So these are just few concrete examples of what the European Union is doing. Let me simply also add that we have approved in the European Union a package of funds around 15.6 billion euro to help our vulnerable partners around the world, so that we can all deal with the impact of the pandemic, because we are all in this together.
Absolutely.
And we need together to come out of the crisis.
Indeed. You mentioned about the World Health Organization. I'll come to that in a bit. But before that, I want to quote what the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, said not so long ago. And if I can quote from his statement or blog, he says, and I quote here, "There's a global battle of narratives going on in which timing is a crucial factor. In January, the dominant framing was of this being a local crisis in Hubei province, aggravated by the cover-up of crucial information by Chinese party officials. Europe was sending a lot of medical equipment to help Chinese authorities that were overwhelmed at the time. Since then, China has brought down local new infections to single figures, and it's now sending equipment and doctors to Europe, as others do as well. China is aggressively pushing the message that unlike the US, it is a responsible and reliable partner. In the battle of narratives, we have also seen attempts to discredit the EU, as such, and some instances where Europeans have been stigmatized as if all were carriers of the virus," unquote. Now, there are a lot of ground he's covered in this statement. He's spoken about the Chinese, the cover-up. He's spoken about how China is changing the narrative. He's spoken about stigmatization of European Union nationals. So your thoughts, Ambassador, on this changing perception and the battle of narratives, as Borrell put it?
Well, look, what I can tell you is that this is a moment for cooperation. This is a moment where we all need to pull together as an international community. And it's only by cooperating across borders that we can beat the virus.
Right.
And the European Union is actively working for a common international approach. We want to fight the pandemic together, and we want to assist the most vulnerable members of the international community. So that's where all international endeavors must be based.
Right.
And our action needs to be grounded on timely and transparent sharing of information, grounded on the best available scientific evidence. So this is our focus now, and that's where the essential efforts of the European Union are focused upon as of today.
Right, and you spoke about the transparent sharing of information. So in that context, Ambassador Astuto, the US and Australia, to begin with, have called for an independent investigation into the origin and spread of the virus. Is there an EU position as well on this?
Well, look, the High Representative said a few days ago that we would welcome a thorough scientific inquiry into the origins of the virus as an important exercise for the future to prevent further global crisis. But again, let me repeat, the priority now is about saving lives. So that's where the focus of our efforts must be, addressing the health challenge. And in order to do so successfully, we have to do it together. We must all pull together at bilateral, multilateral level. And that's the focus of our endeavors now, facing the health emergency together.
Right. Let's shift our focus, Ambassador, if you will, to South Asia and India in particular. Now, since the outbreak of the coronavirus, we've seen the Indian government take radical measures, for instance, imposing a flight ban very early on, imposing a countrywide, a nationwide lockdown for now nearly 40 days, a country of the size and scale of India with 1.3 billion people, Ambassador, in lockdown for more than 1 month. We've also seen India engage in diplomacy in terms of helping other countries with pharmaceutical products, including hydroxychloroquine and paracetamol and other products. We also seen Indian government collaborating with European Union and other countries to repatriate foreign nationals stranded in India. So on balance, when you look back at Indian government's response to the crisis, what's your assessment of how good or bad India has performed?
Well, look, I think the Indian government has taken extremely seriously the crisis, and rightly so. And they have adopted very strict measures for very good reasons, based on scientific evidence. And I think what you can see is that the infection is still contained in India, so it's definitely a success for India and a success for the world. What I would also like to say is that the European Union looks at India as an indispensable partner in this global endeavor of the international community to fight the virus. And we are actually cooperating in a number of ways. We have a constant conversation. And we have particularly appreciated the spirit of global solidarity, which has inspired a number of decisions by the government of India. You referred, for instance, to medical supplies, and we're very grateful to the government of India for having authorized several shipments of pharmaceuticals to Europe at this time of need. Not just to Europe, actually, to a number of countries and partners worldwide. I think that's a concrete example of the global solidarity we need.
And in that context, Ambassador, is there any collaboration or cooperation happening between Brussels and New Delhi on vaccine research, for instance?
Well, the European Union has launched several new initiatives in research and innovation to look for a vaccine. We have invested now in an emergency fund, 140 million euro. And India is a long-standing partner also in research and innovation. For instance, we have been working for quite a number of years on developing a new generation of influenza vaccines. And we are joining hands with India also on some multilateral fora with a focus on vaccine development. So as the European Union, India is also stepping up its efforts on finding a vaccine for COVID-19. And what I can say is that we will certainly look at all possibilities for further developing our partnership also in this respect.
Indeed. And in the absence of a vaccine, Ambassador, many people around the world say social distancing is the only viable solution or alternative. In that context, Ambassador, is there a view in Brussels as to how long to enforce a lockdown? Many countries and communities are saying, enough, let's get on with our lives. But some governments, with valid reasons, including India, are having a cautious response. They're either deciding to partially enforce the lockdown or partially lift the lockdown. So is there a consensus in Brussels as we speak on how to enforce or lift or extend the lockdown?
Well, look, I'm not a medical doctor, so I cannot enter into specific details. But what I can say is that what inspires decision in Europe is the best scientific evidence. It is the best scientific advice we can get. And I think the same is true for India. So whatever decision is taken, obviously, needs to be grounded on science. So we are seeing some easing up of restrictions after a long lockdown, but all that obviously is dependent on the scientific advice of government.
And talking about multilateral organizations, Ambassador, you spoke about the World Health Organization. Now, at the recently concluded G20 summit, the virtual summit, Prime Minister Modi of India spoke about reforms of the WHO. Now, does the European Union subscribe to that view that WHO needs to be reformed in keeping with the times we're living in?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is to pay tribute to the initiative of the Prime Minister to engage a conversation on COVID in G20. I think it was very timely, and it's something that the European Union totally subscribes to. We need to mobilize all international tools at our disposal, all multilateral tools we have to fight the virus. On WHO, I think that in order to engage in a global response, we clearly have to use the instruments we have. And the UN and WHO are particularly relevant in this respect. We can also engage on discussion about the future, but at this stage, obviously, the focus is on the health emergency. We need to save lives, so that's where we are concentrating now.
Right. I want to take you back to the domestic situation obtaining in the EU, Ambassador, and we saw some dissonance between Italy and Brussels, Italy and the EU in the initial stages about how Italian leaders felt that EU was not helping them enough in terms of medical facilities, in terms of funding. So have Italy and EU overcome those initial setbacks and now collaborating and working firmly together hand in hand with other countries included?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's taken some time to get prepared for facing this crisis. But it's also fair to say that this has happened to everyone. The whole international community has been taken aback by the magnitude of the epidemics.
Right.
But I'm happy to say that now, for sure, the European Union has pulled together and we have set in motion an extraordinary number of measures that are meant to address the health crisis now and then the economic fallout in a post-COVID scenario. So the answer to your question is yes, we are now acting together in a spirit of full solidarity day in, day out, and we are using all the tools we have available at EU level and when it comes to individual member states. That's true domestically, but the same recipe, solidarity, applies to our international projection. If there is one thing that this crisis has taught us, it's that the world is one. The virus knows no border. So we all need to act together.
Indeed. And do you think, Ambassador, that this COVID-19 crisis has changed the definition or approach towards security, for instance? Is this, in a sense, a new 9/11 moment in the sense that health security has come into prominence on the world map, at the global level? As Mr. Borrell said not too long ago, that health security must be a priority for the EU and other countries as well. So is health security front and center of the global narrative today as we speak?
Well, it certainly is. As we speak, it certainly is. And the other lessons to be drawn by the crisis that we need to devise global responses to the global challenges. And the European Union is doing its part in fostering a common international approach. So domestically, I think we are acting with determination to protect our citizens and public health. But we are doing the same also globally, to address the consequences of the crisis around the world. So now the health emergency, tomorrow the economic fallout. And I'm glad to say that in this we are together with India. We start from the same proposition that we need a responsible response by the international community, a response based on solidarity and multilateralism. So together with India, I think that we can contribute to shaping the future global agenda, fostering multilateralism and international cooperation.
Right. Ambassador, I want you to look ahead now and look into the crystal ball, so to speak, and tell our viewers what a post-corona world order might look like and the EU's and India's role in the post-corona new world order.
Look, you said it yourself, it's difficult to gauge today what the post-COVID world will look like. Will it be different? Certainly there are lessons to be learned. And from the perspective of the European Union, lesson number one is about the need for global solidarity, about the need for multilateralism, about fostering international cooperation. So that's certainly one feature of the reflections that we hope we will be able, all of us, to draw upon when this virus will be over. And in these, I think India is on the same page. And the actions of the government of India so far have demonstrated to be steered by the spirit of global solidarity.
You spoke about the lessons learned, Ambassador, and first lesson is the increasing reliance or salience of multilateralism in the world order. That's lesson number one in your estimation. Now, some would argue that in a post-corona world order, it will be an Asian century in the sense that China has proven to the world how to grapple with a crisis of this magnitude. It has kept the death toll and cases low. It is helping other countries cope with the crisis. So in terms of winners and losers, there are many commentators who say that the European Union might end up as the biggest loser of all in terms of losing the idea of European Union, the European Union project, so to speak. So do you agree with that submission that EU might end up on the losing side going forward?
Well, I don't so much believe in the concept of winners and losers. We are all in this together. It's a challenge to humanity, to mankind overall. This is not the moment about discussing about borders. The virus knows no borders, and we need to act accordingly. As to the European Union, well, I beg to differ to this assessment. Actually, my impression is that the European Union is growing stronger out of the crisis, and its values of solidarity, and this fundamental value of solidarity is actually getting more and more recognized. So my take would be that actually to work together, we learn out of this crisis about the need to work in a multilateral fashion, in a cooperative approach.
So you're confident that multilateralism and globalization will survive this crisis?
I think they have to. I think that's the lesson we can draw. I mean, in a time of crisis, there is a natural instinct simply to look inward, but it's a wrong instinct. If we look inward, we'll all suffer. In terms, it will take longer for us to recover. We will pay a higher human cost. It's only by cooperating together that we can actually mitigate the effects now and then win the challenge later.
Right. And talking about South Asia now, Ambassador, you're also accredited to other countries in the neighborhood, including Bhutan, for instance. So what's your assessment of South Asia as a whole in terms of combating the coronavirus pandemic, number one? And number two, for instance, the Prime Minister Modi's initiative of reaching out to the SAARC countries and creating a fund for helping all SAARC members to cope with this crisis. So is South Asia doing all it can to beat the virus, in your estimation?
Well, thank you very much. I don't think I can be so ambitious as to pretend to have an overview of the whole continent. I'm accredited to Bhutan only, and Bhutan, I think, is coping well. Again, Bhutan has been taking measures early on, and now they're reaping the fruit in the sense that the rate of infection is pretty low. Let me also simply briefly comment on the initiative of the Prime Minister to bring the conversation on the virus at the start. And in this sense, I think it's particularly timely initiative because regional cooperation is an essential piece of the puzzle when we talk about multilateral.
Absolutely.
So it's indeed a praiseworthy initiative.
Indeed. And a quick word from you, Ambassador, on the postponement of the EU-India summit. Prime Minister Modi was supposed to travel to Brussels, which had to be postponed. So are we looking at a future date, for instance? If not, Prime Minister Modi physically traveling to Brussels, maybe a virtual conference, maybe? I mean, any thoughts on that?
Well, we are discussing, we are actively discussing this with the Indian government. We had to postpone the summit on the 13th of March for obvious reasons, and we are now focusing on the health emergency. But what I would like to point out that even at this time, the interaction between the European Union and India continues. It continues with regular contacts. The President of the Commission von der Leyen spoke to the Prime Minister a few weeks ago. The High Representative Borrell also had a conversation with the Minister, with Dr. Jay Shankar. And we're also discussing about perspective for the next summit. So what I can tell you is that the interaction is still very strong, ongoing, even in a virtual mode.
Right. And just last couple of questions, Ambassador, very quickly, the regional situation in the region, if you look at Afghanistan, for instance, there is a lot of back and forth happening between Brussels and Kabul. NATO is involved, Americans are involved, there's talks happening with the Taliban. Your thoughts on the way forward for peace in Afghanistan, Ambassador, because that's a very crucial part of the world which has been in crisis for years, for decades on end, with no solution in sight. So does the EU have a position on how to proceed with the talks with the Taliban? Maybe offer to host the talks going forward?
I'm not sure I'm particularly well positioned to discuss about Afghanistan. I'm not an expert about that, but what I can tell for sure is that we look forward to an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process, which can preserve what has been gained in the past decade or so in terms of rule of law, democratic rights, women's rights. And we are sure that whatever step is taken will be conducive to that result. Obviously, peace is paramount.
All right, on that note, Ambassador Astuto, thank you so much for making time to be on DD India and speak to our viewers. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this special broadcast. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile, and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.